It's that time of year, the Pro Bowl rosters get released, we see who's made it, who's been voted in, and of course, what always comes along with that is a list of, top 10 players who have been snubbed by the Pro Bowl this year, and I thought, why not, well, I've done this before, that's why I thought, why not, go back to what I've looked at before. Let's take a look at the top Pro Bowl snubs, pretty much not of all time, but of current players of all time, so trying to take a look at the best players in each position that have never made a Pro Bowl. Now, of course, this isn't as much to say they should have made a Pro Bowl because, there's only a limited number of spaces. Not everyone can always make it in. So let's take a look at the top players in each position that have never been voted into a Pro Bowl. And some of these are just outright ridiculous. So we start at left tackle with Nate Solder. Now, every tackle that makes the Pro Bowl is a left tackle, which makes making this position even harder. So some very good players get left out. Nate Solder, in my opinion, was just the best of those that hasn't made it yet. I think Alejandro Villanueva this year is one of those picks that kind of gets in there based on his name having been out there a little bit this year. So maybe Nate Solder should have even gone ahead of him. The argument could be made, but again, left tackle, very, very popular position. And actually, Lane Johnson making it into the Pro Bowl this year is huge because out of everybody, all of the active players currently in the NFL, Lane Johnson is the first right tackle to make it into the Pro Bowl. So everybody else that's made the Pro Bowl out of all current players has always been a left tackle in both tackle positions. We move on to the guard position, Roger Saffold. Now, this one was not that hard, and Saffold a very good player this year, of course. There's always the argument, should they've made it in any year before. Saffold, I think, deserves the credit for how well the offensive line has been playing to lead the way for Todd Gurley and protect Jared Goff. Forget the run game. Jared Goff has been sacked less times so far this year in 14 games than he was sacked in 7 last year. So the difference is huge, and that offensive line deserves that recognition. Roger Saffold, the representative of the Rams that have never made the Pro Bowl, and to be fair, a lot of those starters over the last few years should never be anywhere near a Pro Bowl. And then at center, we've got Brandon Linder, the highest paid center in the NFL, the highest paid center in NFL history, and you figure it's for a good reason. Of course, we've seen the Jacksonville Jaguars offensive line show up this year as well, paving the way for Leonard Fournette and helping to protect Blake Bortles, who's having a pretty good season again. I did only just realize that we've got 2 Patriots players on this line, but Shaq Mason, again, a guy who could deserve to go to the Pro Bowl. Again, it's all about space and how good are you compared to those other guys, but he's certainly good enough to make it in. He's not a bad player whatsoever. And then at right tackle, the biggest snub of all of these. With those 4, I said, yeah, they could make it in. Jack Conklin, 110% should be in. Last year, definitely should have been in. He was voted first team All-Pro, but didn't make the Pro Bowl. Now that Lane Johnson's made it in as a right tackle, and absolutely Lane Johnson should be in there, and probably ahead of Jack Conklin, but Jack Conklin should be right behind him, voted in. I mean, how can you make All-Pro and not make the Pro Bowl? That's ridiculous. I mean, I get how literally it works because the voting systems are different, but you know what I mean. Now, the tight end position was a little hard. Actually, they get pretty good recognition here, and the guys that don't are the ones that don't tend to get 1,000-yard receiving season. So if you're a top-tier tight end, you've probably already been to the Pro Bowl. But our first guy I'm putting in here is Hunter Henry, and our second guy, Cameron Brate. I think those 2 guys, out of the guys that haven't made it to the Pro Bowl, should definitely be up for consideration. So with the wide receivers, I'm going to go in reverse order. Now, Julian Edelman, of course, this year, he's out for the season, obviously not going to make the Pro Bowl. However, the fact he hasn't made it yet is ridiculous considering he is, I'm going to say it without a doubt, the best slot receiver in the NFL. And next up is Brandon Cooks. Now, Michael Thomas has broken the Breeze Saints curse for wide receivers that they cannot make a Pro Bowl. So who knows, maybe Brandon Cooks next year could make it too. But still, for how prolific he has been as a downfield threat and a guy that doesn't just go stretch the field, it's ridiculous that he hasn't made a Pro Bowl in what is now going to be 3 1,000-yard seasons. And then finally, Davante Adams. Now, he should have made it last year. How many receivers had more touchdowns than Davante Adams last year? It was 1. He was tied with, I think, 3 other players as well, but there was only 1 wide receiver with more receiving touchdowns than Davante Adams. How many receivers currently have more receiving touchdowns than Davante Adams? I'll let you guess. It's 1. 2 seasons in a row now, he is second in touchdown catches, but somehow doesn't make a Pro Bowl. Onto the fullback position, they're actually pretty well represented here because there's not too many standout fullbacks, but Anthony Sherman, very good player, hasn't made a Pro Bowl yet. And then the running back position is one where I had to mention more than just one player. So Lamar Miller, a guy you could definitely argue should have made it on a couple of seasons. Carlos Hyde, another guy, a guy who's had very respectable seasons on some very unrespectable teams. And then LeGarrette Blount. Now, this is more of an argument for last season. How do you get 18 touchdowns and don't get voted into a Pro Bowl. And then the quarterback, I don't like to go for guys who have had, you know, one good season, but really with quarterbacks, it's tough to find a guy who is good enough to make a Pro Bowl, and Jared Goff this year has 100% been good enough to make a Pro Bowl. I would argue should go in ahead of Russell Wilson, who I understand is doing a lot to inflate his team's record to what it is right now, but Jared Goff has been outstanding. You cannot argue with that, and he probably should be in the Pro Bowl, and that is the offense. Let's take a look at the defense. So at free safety, Kevin Byard. Now I know, you know, he's basically got 1.5 seasons in him, so if he doesn't make it in a couple of years, you can make the argument, but right now he's pretty much the best free safety that hasn't been to a Pro Bowl yet. Finishing off the safeties, Patrick Chung at strong safety. There's a couple of options. You've got Tony Jefferson, Adrian Amos, guys who have been playing very well for multiple seasons, but I think Patrick Chung pretty much among the best strong safeties in the NFL yet to make a Pro Bowl. And we'll start at left outside linebacker here. Melvin Ingram definitely should have been to the Pro Bowl by now. He is a dominant player. Then we move on to the middle linebacker position. Blake Martinez, based off this season, probably should have made the Pro Bowl, had an argument to make it. But also, you are competing with Bobby Wagner and Luke Kuechly. You don't stand much of a chance. You've got to have an incredible season to beat those two guys out. But still, he's a guy that should be considered a Pro Bowl level player. But just ahead of him, I would say Deion Jones, who's had 2 very good Pro Bowl level seasons. Another one this year, building on top of what he did last year. But then, right outside linebacker is the true snub out of all of these guys. There is absolutely no way Telvin Smith shouldn't have been to a Pro Bowl yet. It is ridiculous. He more than deserves to be there, ahead of a bunch of guys who have made it instead. Telvin Smith, without a doubt, top 5 linebacker in the NFL, should be in a Pro Bowl. Next up is the defensive line. Now, there's some positions where you have to look at who has been voted in to figure out, you know, players who have been left out over the years. But with the defensive line, pretty much for every position, there's guys I have at the top of my head. These guys are Pro Bowl snubs, notoriously so, and it continues this year. Now, we'll start at defensive tackle with DeForest Buckner. He's not one of the 3 big snubs. He is because I like to have, you know, a 4-4 kind of system, so we have 2 defensive tackles and 2 inside linebackers. DeForest Buckner, pretty much one of the best players not to make a Pro Bowl yet. Of course, has only had 2 seasons, but ahead of him in the middle, Damon Harrison, yet to make a Pro Bowl, keeps getting snubbed year after year, and it only gets worse from this point on. Brandon Graham was voted All-Pro last year, is having a career year this year, so is playing even better, and still doesn't make the Pro Bowl. And then Mike Daniels, you know, Jarrell Casey and Mike Daniels used to have something in common. Then they started to recognize Jarrell Casey, start sending him to the Pro Bowl. Poor Mike Daniels still on the outside looking in, despite absolutely being one of the best right-end defensive tackle players in the NFL. And then finally, the cornerbacks, which are a little bit harder, and we're going to have a little wrinkle in here as well. We'll start off with Jason McCourty, always a guy who was a lot better than he got credit for, and we've seen that now with the Browns. It's hard to stand out on the Browns, but Jason McCourty has been very good. Then we've got Trumaine Johnson, definitely getting paid because of those franchise tags, like a Pro Bowl corner. Has not been to a Pro Bowl yet, though, although he plays at that level. And our final cornerback, we're coming in with a bit of an asterisk here. So I thought because Marshawn Lattimore did make the Pro Bowl, and because it is incredibly hard to find cornerbacks that are good enough to, you know, that you can argue that should have been to a Pro Bowl that haven't been yet, we'll bring in Tre'Davious White, who probably should have got that recognition this year. That is the defense. We now got special teams to finish it off. At punter, we've got the man Marquette King. It is, after all, a popular vote for the Pro Bowl, so it's kind of surprising that he hasn't made it. And kicker is very hard. Pretty much every kicker that should be recognized has been to the Pro Bowl. Graham Gano, you know, having a good season again this year. We can argue that he should have made it. And then the return specialist, Jamal Agnew. Now, it's, you know, he's competing with Pharaoh Cooper, who has ridiculous kick return averages and is taking that ball out so far every time. However, you know, 2 punt return touchdowns, a couple more that were called back for like holding penalties and stuff, but it doesn't take away from his ability. Probably you can definitely argue he should be in there as a return specialist. So that is it. This is the team of the best players, I think, in each of these positions that has never been voted to a Pro Bowl. Some of them you can't argue with whatsoever. Damon Harrison, Brandon Graham, Mike Daniels, beyond some of the best in their positions, should have found a year by now that they get voted in. Telvin Smith, no excuse for it. You look at some of the offensive players, Devontae Adams, past 2 years, should have been a fixture in Pro Bowl rosters, somehow doesn't make it in. And Jack Conklin, how do you make All-Pro? How do you make first-team All-Pro as a rookie, but don't go to the Pro Bowl? That is, you know, any evidence you need of saying the Pro Bowl is just a popular vote and it has nothing much to do with ability. That is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know of any players you like that haven't made a Pro Bowl. And as always, when you talk about Pro Bowl snubs, you got to mention your man Marcus Colston.